In a world searching for meaning, few texts have shaped history, hearts, and human identity like the Bible. But beyond its verses lies a story, ancient, eternal, and alive. Welcome to Speed Reads, where we journey book by book through Scripture, not in fragments but in sweeping narratives rich with depth, drama, and divine design. Today we explore the Book of Habakkuk, a powerful dialogue between a prophet and God, wrestling with the problem of evil and the apparent triumph of injustice. Habakkuk stands out as one of the few prophetic books that isn't just a message to the people of Israel or Judah, but rather a dialogue between the prophet himself and God. This makes the book of Habakkuk unique, as it provides us with a candid and intimate conversation about faith, justice, and the nature of God's rule in a world filled with injustice. Habakkuk, like many of us, struggles with the age-old question, why do the wicked seem to prosper while the righteous suffer? This personal wrestle forms the heart of the book, and its resolution provides profound insights into how we are to live with faith, even in the face of evil. The first chapter of Habakkuk begins with the prophet's cry to God, asking why he allows injustice to flourish. Habakkuk is deeply troubled by the violence, oppression, and corruption that he sees around him in Judah. The righteous are suffering while the wicked seem to go unpunished. Habakkuk's question is one that echoes across time and space. If God is just, why does he allow evil to prevail? Habakkuk is troubled by the silence of God and the apparent lack of action in the face of widespread injustice. The prophet's lament is raw and honest. He feels that God has abandoned his people, allowing the wicked to gain power and dominate the land. God's response to Habakkuk is both surprising and unsettling. Instead of answering directly in the way Habakkuk might expect, God reveals that he is raising up the Babylonians, those cruel and oppressive people, as an instrument of judgment upon Judah. The Babylonians, who are even more wicked and violent than the Israelites, will be used to punish them for their sin. This answer leaves Habakkuk even more perplexed. How can God, who is holy and just, use such a wicked nation to carry out his justice? The Babylonians are notorious for their brutality, and Habakkuk struggles to understand how God can allow such a people to prosper, let alone use them as an instrument of judgment. God's reply is profound. He reminds Habakkuk that his ways are higher than our ways, and his wisdom is beyond our understanding. While Habakkuk cannot fully comprehend why God would choose to use the Babylonians in this way, God assures him that justice will ultimately be done. The Babylonians may appear to be invincible now, but their time will come. God will not allow them to prosper forever. In the end, he will judge them for their own wickedness. The key point here is that God's justice is not bound by human understanding of fairness or timing. He sees the bigger picture, and his actions are ultimately for the good of his people, even when they are difficult to understand in the moment. In response to God's answer, Habakkuk is left with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. He begins his prayer in chapter 3 by recalling God's past acts of salvation and power. He reflects on the times when God delivered his people from their enemies and displayed his might in ways that were undeniable. Habakkuk's song of praise is an acknowledgement of God's greatness, even in the face of the overwhelming difficulties that lay ahead. He speaks of God's sovereignty over nature, describing God as the one who shakes the earth, controls the seas, and commands the heavens. Habakkuk understands that God is not distant or passive, but is actively involved in the world, ruling with power and justice. As Habakkuk continues in his prayer, he speaks of his deep sense of awe and fear in the presence of God's glory. He acknowledges that the coming judgment will be difficult and even terrifying, but he resolves to trust in God's goodness and sovereignty. He knows that even in the darkest of times, God is still in control, and his ultimate plan will prevail. The prophet expresses his confidence in God's faithfulness and his commitment to trust in God's deliverance, no matter what happens. The book closes with one of the most powerful declarations of faith in all of Scripture. In the final verses of Habakkuk, the prophet declares that even if everything around him falls apart, if the crops fail, if the vineyards die, if the fields are barren, he will still rejoice in the Lord. His joy will not be dependent on external circumstances, but on his relationship with God. Habakkuk chooses to trust in God's goodness, even when life is filled with uncertainty and suffering. This act of choosing joy in the face of hardship is a profound testimony of faith. Habakkuk's declaration is a reminder that, even in times of suffering, we can trust that God is working his purposes out, and we can choose to rejoice in his goodness, knowing that he is faithful to his promises. The book of Habakkuk ends with a powerful statement of faith in the midst of confusion and pain. Habakkuk's willingness to trust God despite his confusion and doubts provides a model for us today. It shows that faith is not the absence of questions, but the courage to trust God even when we don't have all the answers. Habakkuk's example challenges us to hold fast to our faith, even when life doesn't make sense, knowing that God is still sovereign and His justice will prevail in the end. Thank you for joining us in this deep dive into the Book of Habakkuk. If you found this journey through the prophet's dialogue with God insightful, make sure to subscribe to Speed Reads for more explorations of Scripture.